Poinsettia, Chapter 6. Gavin shot awake, panting, choking and sweating. He looked around. He was alone in his bed. He wiped his face, then peered out of the curtains about the bed, keeping out any chance of sunlight. It was still daylight. He grabbed for his pocket watch. The time was 1300 hours. He still had a good 5 or 6 hours of sleep that he could squeeze in. Calming down, he sighed and rolled over, intending to wrap his arms about a pillow, but began to realize his arms were about a body. He opened his eyes, staring directly into Angus's face. "Is everything okay, master?" "Ah!" he shouted, nearly falling out of the bed. "You miserable, damned cur! What the hell are you doing? Where did you come from?" "I heard you whimpering, master, and I came in to see if you were okay," he said. "Get out!" Gavin ordered, grabbing for Angus and throwing him onto the floor. The vampire was up in the dark room, avoiding any filtered sunlight and throwing on his housecoat. He grabbed up Angus and tossed him into the dark hall. "Don't ever invite yourself into my bed again." "Aw, I fear I've upset you, master. What sort of nightmare did you have?" "Nightmare? Don't be nosy. Did you do as I asked? Only hours ago, you were asleep before I returned. Rather unlike yourself. You'll need to feed soon to replenish your energy. It's not right for vampires to call it in that early." "That is none of your concern," Gavin humphed, pushing his hair out of his face. "Angus, I have a job for you." "For me? Do you trust me that much? Are you trying to get rid of me for the day?" "Both. Now, listen carefully. I don't like having my money tampered with. And an offense even worse is to tamper with the money of my beloved. You will make arrangements for every florist in Scotland to break their backs to get those poinsettias to the hospital. You personally will escort them. Any price will do. If anyone refuses, handle them. The matter will be solved today before I rise for the night." "You're quite adamant about the hospital having them." "You should know why, you miserable old cur," Gavin growled. "It has been 70 years since I was cast out of my own castle. It's quite an insult to have the church ban you from your own home. Salt in the Wound is to take it over as a place where the word is prominent. But I forgave the whole fact. I was not without my resources, and my castle became a children's hospital and an orphanage, something this town and I needed. So despite the grudge I should have had, I wanted to protect it for many sakes. I will not allow anyone to tamper with what is mine. Go, Angus, and find everything that you can find. Sniff out anything you can. I sense something very strange. My absence will benefit many a competitor, and I will not allow anyone to take anything else away from me. Go, you mongrel, go!" "Yes, master," Angus whimpered, dodging and hopping away as Gavin attempted to kick him. "I'm going, master, right away, master." "Put your backs into it, you swines!" Angus shouted as the trucks backed up into the lot of the hospital. "You were given orders. Dinna make me have to report your asses for nae following them." "What is that?" Sister Bernadette asked, just inside the building. The doctor, a man with long black hair and trousers, waistcoat, sand-colored shirt, and white coat, and a stethoscope about his neck, peered up. "Sounds like someone yelling outside." "Brilliant deduction, doctor," she replied sarcastically, coming outside and gasping. "Oh! What is this?" "These be the poinsettias that ye wanted, ma'am," Angus said, tipping his cap. He dressed pretty much the same, in his kilt, socks, and shoes. However, this time, he wore a navy-colored reefer jacket and a dark gray cap. "How did you manage this so fast?" "I had already said that Lord McIntyre is rather generous at this time of year. As promised, every wee lad and lass in the building receives our annual poinsettias to care for until the 12th Christmas Day. Master would have cut some from his own garden, but they're so nipped by the cold, they wouldn't survive very long." "The children would be so happy," she sighed. "It's true, isn't it? We are named well. Raphael, the protector of health and children, is looking out for us." "Believe what you like, ma'am," Angus replied. He glanced at the men carrying the flowers. "All right, follow me. Every flower finds a home in a child's arms." The children all gathered in their recreational room. Angus sat on a round table in the center, watching those pale, hopeless cheeks grow colorful, red as the flowers they held. This really did bring a transformation in the children here, didn't it? Even the scent would change from depressed and sick to hopeful and joyous. "You look like a big kid," one of the boys shouted, pointing at Angus. "He's got girly legs," from another. Angus chuckled and stood up. "I am a big kid. I'm a child at heart. Bodies may grow, but hearts can remain eternally youthful in spirit. It is when you let your hearts live in this way that you retain life's vigor and spice." "You talk funny," one girl giggled. "That would be because I grew up speaking the old language. Then this newfangled English thing came about, and I had to learn it. Y'all learn it naturally, so you don't have as thick an accent as us old folk." "You're not old," from another little girl. "You're pretty." "And ye become one of me favourite bonny wee lassies," he smiled at her. "Are you the one who brings the poinsettias every year?" from a shy, soft-spoken little girl. "Not I personally," Angus admitted. "But I work for the man who does. Aye, he was so devastated that his wee angels did not get their flowers," he said, throwing an arm over his face dramatically. "So he bought up all of Scotland, so that ye all would nae go out." He suddenly clapped his hands. "Who likes magic tricks?" Immediately all the children began to clap and cheer, insisting each one loved magic tricks more than the last. "Can you really do magic?" one of the boys shouted. "Yeah, bet your bum I can. I'm a magician," Angus declared, doing a little dance on the table, kicking his heels, making jacks and little rubber balls dance between his fingers, which he transformed into cards, which seemed to obediently float in one long bridge from hand to hand. The deck vanished in one of his hands, but out of nowhere, he pulled out a card here and there, dropping them carelessly. He then balled his hands into a fist, pulling out colored kerchiefs, balling them together, and then releasing them as one long stream, each kerchief tied to the next. The children clapped and cheered for him. "Do more! Another one! How'd you do that?" they all began to chatter. He held out his hands as if to settle them. Now, lads and lassies, settle your bonny wee heads. I've got plenty more where that came from." He pulled out a small white ball, no bigger than a golf ball, and popped it into his mouth, faking as if he had swallowed it, and then magically pulling it from his ear. "Look at that!" he gasped. "Again?" "Yeah!" from the children. He popped it into his mouth, faking the swallow again, and motioned for it to come from his ear. But it didn't come. "Oh dear, where did it go?" he gasped, trying to make it appear in his hand. In the next instant it came dropping from under his kilt. He placed his hands on the back of his kilt with a little yelp. "Oh my, I seem to have laid an egg." The children laughed. To them, this Angus guy was quite a character. He was so childish and humorous. Above that, he also looked childish. He was one of them. Yes, one of them. So much a character was he that they easily accepted that he was unlike any adult, unlike anyone on the outside. The intuition of a child was and is always a wonderful thing. How amazing they could see more than the more educated adults. "All right, lads and lassies, now for the grand finale." He held up his hands. He then reached up and pulled off his cap, holding it out so that they could all see its emptiness. A little twirl here, a little skip there, a kick of his heels, another turn, and he wriggled his fingers over the empty hat, then placed it atop his head. Ta-da! The children were suddenly unamused. "What did you do?" from one of the boys. "Ah, how silly of me," he said, face-palming himself. "I did not finish." He reached up and slowly began to pull off his cap. and on his head rested a little brown and gray rabbit, bathing itself with its forepaws. The children cheered at that. Animals were not allowed in the hospital, and many of them once knew pets. Angus removed the rabbit from his head and held it out for the children. "He's a friendly wee fella. Who wants to pet him?" "Me! No, me! Me first! Can I?" He beamed with pride. How happy he had made Master's little children. He let the children surround him, even climb on him to pet the rabbit. He was quite happy with this. But then, what wolf was not happy to have puppies playing all over him? "He's so fuzzy," from a little girl. "So soft, too," from another. "Aye, he's very soft and fuzzy," Angus smiled. "He loves all the attention." "No!" came the scream from the doorway. The children all darted away from Angus, leaving him confused, holding out a rabbit that was just as confused. Sister Bernadette stormed over to him, pointing at the offensive creature. "Mr. McDoodle, what is that?" "Surely an educated lass like yourself knows what this is," he replied, holding it up to her and trying to rub it on her cheek. "It's a bonny wee bunny." "I know that." "Then why did you ask?" "What is it doing here?" she demanded. "Sitting in me hand." "Boy, you sure asked some silly questions." A few of the children snickered, but quickly silenced when Sister Bernadette eyed over the room at them. "Mr. McDoodle, this is not just an orphanage, but a hospital. This creature is unsanitary. It cannot be here." "But look how happy it makes the wee ones." "Yes, and staying up late eating cake, candy, and ice cream would make them happy too. But it's not good for them. We have children here with allergies, which cannot be around animals. What if something happened to them? It would be our responsibility." "Ah, but he's so cute." "Cute doesn't make it healthy," she insisted. "Get it out of here. Do not pull this sort of stunt again. Not only can't I risk the health of all these children, but I cannot bear to look at their sorrowful faces if I have to do this again." "I think animals are a wonderful form of therapy, sister," Angus insisted. "Look at them. Sure, some wee ones are allergic to animals, but are there any children also allergic to things like milk or carrots, or even some of the medicines you offer? You simply just have to work around them and find the alternative. Perhaps for those who cannot have fuzzy pets, you can provide goldfish." "Mr. McDoodle, come with me into the hall. The children need not hear your nonsense." Without waiting for his answer, she grabbed him by his ear and dragged him out of the room and down the hall to a quieter, more secluded area. "Mr. McDoodle, please do not make me look like the bad guy here. I just didn't understand why you'd be so opposed. Even if your methods are indeed true, and even if we did work around such things, pets are a lot of maintenance. They are dirty and require veterinary care. They also require food. As it is, St. Raphael's is just barely able to stay afloat. Our budget is extremely tight. A lot of our funds have been cut back, and we've had to borrow money to make up for those losses in order to adjust. Now, we can rearrange our budget, but our debt makes it harder still to acquire what we need to keep those children healthy. The items we need for treatments and medicine are very expensive. Not to mention feeding and clothing these children. And surely, we have to give them some sort of quality. We have to afford some sort of education for them. We have to maintain furniture they sleep in, sit in. We have to maintain the furnaces and fireplaces. We have to be able to pay our butchers and chimney sweeps, among other services we get from the outside. There is no room in our hearts or budgets for animals. I would hate to have to break their hearts, Mr. McDoodle. We cannot afford to take care of ourselves. There is no possible way to care for pets. I know that the hospital has hit a wee bit of a bump, sister, but the finances of St. Raphael's was always arranged. I do not understand how there can be problems now, when there never were any in the past. Cutbacks, she replied. The money that we had has dwindled and trickled down to nothing. It seems we cannot keep track of it. It's a mystery to us. The Board of Trustees has informed us that our budgets are being overspent, requiring extra money to be put in to cover our debts. I'm not sure how we've managed to do it either. But that is the fact. and we seem to be in a downward spiral. We try to keep the faith and give the children hope, but the fact seems to be that our budgets are smaller and smaller, and more is being removed. It's plain to see that St. Raphael's Children's Hospital will not be here for another 70 years. We'll be lucky if we can stand for another year or so. That just does not sound right. It's out of our hands. Then in whose hands would be in? Our finances are cleared through Lord McCairn, the board treasurer. McCairn? Angus thought for a long moment. Ah, I see. I forgot about him. He's the young one with the dark hair, son of the late Lord Jimmy McCairn? I assume so. He was appointed about 3 years ago by Mr. Alistair McLaughlin to be the new treasurer after the passing of Mr. Wellington. You work for Lord McIntyre. Do you not know these things? I'm at the board meetings normally, Angus confessed. I suppose I just forgot. I got so used to Mr. Wellington. I forgot that he had died. Perhaps I should talk to him. Maybe if I can convince him that this could be beneficial, he may agree to finance a program. I very much doubt it, she replied, waving him off. He's here today in the offices. You're welcome to waste your breath if you wish. But don't say I didn't warn you. Don't I worry about me, sister. I can take care of myself. I'm not worried about you, so don't worry, she replied. He frowned as she walked off casually, taking the rabbit with her. When she was out of sight, he rubbed his head. Ah, that isn't good. She took me lunch away. He then sighed. I suppose I should see about this Lord McCairn guy. I suppose I should also quit talking to myself before someone catches me and thinks I'm a loony. He adjusted his kilt before marching off towards the offices. Ah, the scent had changed over the years, but how these walls brought back grand memories, and not so grand ones. He had lived within these walls for a few years with Gavin before their eventual eviction. It saddened him to see it become a place of business for several. Still, it was warming to know there were also people who affectionately could call this place home. The gall, really, when he arrived at the office in which Lord McCairn was working, only to be shoved off by the young secretary. An appointment? Him? The personal servant of Lord McIntyre? Lord of the manor? The castle? Patron of the checkbook? The local vampire? How crude. So, what was left to do but wait? He folded his hands behind his back, rocking on the balls of his feet as he waited in a large lobby. Ah, memories of this room, so wide. It once bore furniture of the finest quality, even some of it enhanced with gold leaf, overtop Persian rugs that covered the cool floors. No such luck of these things now. Everything was downgraded to much cheaper imitations and qualities. There was a large hearth to the north side. Above the mantel was a large painting. The painting was commissioned by Gavin himself. It was a gift to the hospital after the passing of his daughter. And the painting itself was that of his daughter, the sweet and caring Caradwyn. She looked like a porcelain doll. She sat in a chair, her feet crossed at her ankles. She wore a mutton-leg frock of green with a white apron. Her skirt came to just at her knees, so it rested neatly in her lap as her pantalettes ruffled the rest of the way down her legs to her little black shoes. Her hair was a dark blonde, or light brown. It was certainly lighter than both Gavin and Clementine's hair. But that was common of youth, was it not? Her hair was done up in long ringlets in the back, little ribbons entwined within. The little copper plaque at the bottom of the expensive frame held her name. In memory, Caradwyn McIntyre, 1827 to 1839. Angus's face softened. He had many fond memories of this child. He was there, after all, when she was born. He had always played the part of the nanny, of Big Brother. She was the closest thing in the world to him. He was determined that the Dampier debutante would grow up into a woman rivaling even a goddess. And he was determined that she would have been his bride. It was when she was involved that Angus could feel the hurt and sorrow and longing his master felt. Gavin longed for his lover Clementine, who would have been his bride. And even Angus, despite his sunny personality, had a longing. He longed for the child that would have grown into his bride, the precious wee Caradwyn. He snapped out of his thoughts when he heard a door squeaking open. A quick whiff of the air, and he knew immediately that Lord McCairn was free. The footsteps rang like cannonball fire in the werewolf's ears, yet silent or quiet to anyone else. "Mr. Angus McDoodle, you wish to see me?" Lord McCairn asked. Angus turned to him. I have a proposition for you." "Do you? Come into my office. Let me hear what you have." Angus followed close behind Lord McCairn. He seemed like a pompous sort of man, quite full of himself, really. "You work for Lord McIntyre, don't you?" "Aye, I do." "And you're the son of Lord Jimmy McCairn, the town pervert?" Lord McCairn stopped dead in his tracks and turned on Angus. "Excuse me?" "Just a question, sir." He held up his hands. "I just didn't know you well, but I knew Jimmy McCairn." "Humph! He is the man who fathered me, but he and I are nothing alike." "I can see that already," Angus remarked. "You seem a stiffer man, and you didn't look like you take pleasure in young lads. You look like a melon sort of person." "Watch your tongue," Lord McCairn spat. "Don't forget to whom you are talking. I am Lord Leopold Oswald McCairn." "And I am Angus McIntyre McDoodle. Pleasure to meet you," he said, grabbing up Lord McCairn's hand and shaking it. The Lord yanked his hand free. "Do not be so casual, boy. Now get yourself together if you want to talk to me. I'm beginning to think you came merely to waste my time." "Not today," Angus replied, following him into the office and hopping into the chair behind the desk. He saw the dagger-like glare of Lord McCairn's eyes and slumped from the chair into the simpler one on the other side of the desk. Lord McCairn sat in the more expensive chair and put a pipe in his mouth, beginning to stuff it with tobacco. "What did you want to say?" "I wanted to tell you about the therapeutic effects of animals on the sick and the soul." "And what does this have to do with me?" "Well, not you personally. I was thinking more of the children. Sister Bernadette seems to think you would not support a therapy animal program. The children light up when they touch an animal, see an animal. When children have hope, they will fight harder to live for it. Sick children can feel better and want to fight for their lives in order to touch an animal again. Orphans here never even get to see animals. Children who touch animals can learn to be gentle and compassionate." "This New Age nonsense is just that, Mr. McDoodle. Nonsense." "I didn't think so." "It involves board money. I think it's a waste. Those children are not here to learn how to play with animals. Let them deal with animals when the orphans are adopted. Let the patients deal with animals when they go home." "Many will never go home, Lord McCairn, and several will never be adopted. Granted, the orphans will either leave the orphanage when they reach adulthood or become a part of the next generation of staff. Those who leave can certainly experiment with such things. But as far as patients, do you realize that many of them are here simply waiting to die? They will never get better. Never will they be well enough to go home and live normal lives. Can't you have it in your heart to give them one last something?" "That is not the job of this establishment. This is a place of business, just like any other," Lord McCairn explained. "It draws in profit in return for a service, but we cannot waste these profits on frivolities. The basic necessities are all that we are required to provide, and we have done that. So if you don't mind, Mr. McDoodle, I bid you a good day." Angus was ushered out, having the door slammed in his face. He blinked, unsure of what had just happened. When it processed, he snarled, "You heartless fool! This is not just a business. This is the final stop for many children. This place is for the children, not your damn pocketbook." He slammed on the door before turning and marching off, pushing a pair of priests out of the way, muttering to himself in the ancient language. He ended up spinning around quite a ways down the corridors and punched the wall with a loud yell, his fist breaking clean through the stone, leaving a hole. He retracted his hand, looking at his knuckles. "You had not heard the last of me." He turned to continue on, only to stop when he saw a young girl. She had seen him. His heart caught in his throat. She was a sweet-looking little girl. She was in a long yellow nightgown, white lace decorating the front, and little faux flowers. In her hand she held a stuffed bear. Her hair was thick and wavy, but still quite lovely, especially for a girl her age. It reminded him of Gavin, only brighter, livelier, and with a brighter tint of red in her auburn. Yet she was pale, and had almost no color in her lips. Her eyes had light bags. Her eyes, which were a lovely hazel color, were fading gray. He could smell it. She was sick. She was one of the patients. "Hey, lassie," he said quietly, just above a whisper. His display had been frightening, especially coming from a scrawny pup like him. The last thing he wanted to do was frighten her further. "You didn't have to be afraid of me." I'm not," she replied. "Are you all right?" He looked at his hand. "I'll be fine. I'm a lot stronger than I look. It takes more than that to hurt me." She came closer to him, bringing out her delicate little hand and placing it on his, looking at it, as if inspecting it for injuries. This was rather cute, really. She couldn't be any more than 7 or 8 years old. He couldn't pinpoint that by scent, however. "You should have one of the nurses look at this," she suggested. "I appreciate your concern, wee Sonny lass." "Sonny?" "Your gown reminds me of the sun in the sky. Very bright, pretty, and yellow." She giggled before coughing a little. He frowned and rubbed her back. "You should head back to your room, Sonny lass. You should rest." "Everybody tells me that," she sighed. "I wish I could go outside and play. I feel so cooped up in here. It feels like... Like? A prison or workhouse." "Have you ever been to a prison or workhouse?" Angus asked. "Well, no, but I imagine this is what it would be like." "Do you have a good imagination?" "I like to think I do," she replied. Angus smiled and patted the bear on the head. "Does he have a name?" "You'll laugh." "Nay, Sonny lass, I promise I will not laugh." She hesitated, looking at the bear and then into Angus's face. She blushed a little. However, rather than pink cheeks, she blushed a purplish color. A graying, perhaps. It was obvious even with color. Her inner rainbow was sick, too. She felt something in him. He had such friendly eyes. There was something about them that reminded her of home. It made her smile really wide before holding the bear out to him. "His name is Bumblebee." "That'd be a very unusual name, Sonny lass," he smiled. "Top of the morning to you, Bumblebee. Take care of me, wee Sonny lass." She giggled. "He's the only friend I have in this place." "That is not true," Angus stated. He crossed his ankles and gave a low, almost gesture-like bow, giving his cap a long tip and bringing it around to meet his head when he stood. "You have me now. Angus McDoodle at your service, Sonny lass." "Why did you hit the wall, Mr. Angus?" she asked. Well, that. I suppose I was very angry about something very sad. But it was wrong of me, and I'll likely get in trouble for it. But that'll be okay. See, when you do something wrong, you should take responsibility for it." "You remind me of home," she laughed. "Ah, then you must have been from a lovely place," he smiled. "I would love to hear about it sometime." "Do you come here often?" "Well, that all depends on my lord's orders. But maybe I'll stop to see me a wee bit of sunshine more often. You make me smile." "Me too," she laughed. It was nice to have a new friend, especially one like him. Bumblebee had been all she needed. At least, that's what she told herself. Still, now that Angus was her friend, by his own admission, it would be nice to hear a voice talking back to her once in a while.